Well, good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Richard Cruz, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is Chief Petty Officer Gavin Johnson. On this day, 100 years ago, the men of the Australian Imperial Force took part in a major operation to break the Hindenburg Line, the last and strongest line of the German defence on the Western Front. The Hindenburg Line was a series of deep, interconnected trenches, dugouts and concrete machine gun emplacements, which were laid out 15 kilometres deep and more than 60 kilometres wide. The Australians had fought hard to reach the most formidable section of the defences, the St Quentin Canal, 2 metres deep with banks 10 metres high. The canal obstructed infantry and tanks alike. On the 29th of September 1918, the operation to breach this heavily defended part of the line was launched across the Bullecourt Tunnel by American and Australian troops, supported by British Corps on the flanks. The inexperienced Americans struggled to clear the ground of the German defenders. The Australians launched the second phase of the operation into a confused morass of men and bodies. Unsure of where their partners, the Americans, were, or whether or not they had been able to establish a line on their objective. In the end, the canal was first breached by the 46th British Midlands Division on a right flank of the Australian and American attack. Their advance under one of the heaviest artillery barrages yet seen materially aided the Australians with making progress across the tunnel. After 4 days of battle, with heavy losses on both sides, the Germans were forced to retreat. This evening we are honoured to acknowledge Mr John King, President, ACT Branch of the Return Services League of Australia, members of Long Tan Company of the Royal Military College Duntroon, the graduating class of 1981. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by visitors to the memorial. Australia's Federation Guard is a tri-service ceremonial unit of the Australian Defence Force. They provide a ceremonial presence at civil and military events and during visits to Australia by foreign dignitaries. The Guard will now dismount the catapult party from the tomb of the unknown Australian soldier within the Hall of Memory. I invite you all to please stand and join in singing the national anthem.
Carnival party, attention! Carnival party, present arms!
Australians, oh, let us rejoice, for we are young and free. We've golden soil and wealth for toil, our home is earth by sea. Our land abounds in nature's gifts of beauty rich and rare. In history's page let every state advance Australia fair. In joyful strains then let us sing, and rise Australia fair.
Carnival party, shoulder arms! Carnival party, order arms!
Ladies and gentlemen, if anyone that can be seated, you're quite welcome to sit. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 Australians who gave their lives for us in war and operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths and floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Corporal Frederick Charles Felgenhauer. Felgenhauer was born in 1890 to Johann and Isabella Felgenhauer of Canyapella, Victoria. His grandfather, also Frederick Felgenhauer, had come to Australia from Germany in 1867, and the family had been growing grapes in the Echuca region since. Fred attended the local school in Canyapella and went on to work a property at Cornelia Creek with his younger brother Herbert. Felgenhauer left the property in charge of his younger brother and enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force in mid-1915. He underwent a period of training in Australia before leaving for active service overseas with reinforcements to the 23rd Battalion. He was first sent to Egypt, where he transferred to the 57th Battalion as part of the expansion and reorganisation of the AIF. When not training, he spent time in Cairo and Heliopolis, writing to his parents that, "Cairo, I think, is the pick of the towns here. The zoo is well worth a visit." He remained in Egypt until June 1916, when his battalion was sent to France to fight on the Western Front. The 57th Battalion took a minor role in the attack on Fromelles, but took on the major part of defending the line after the other battalions in its brigade suffered severe casualties. In October 1916, while the brigade was rebuilding, Felgenhauer was promoted to corporal. In March 1917, while holding the line near Beaumetz, the 57th Battalion sent out a party to occupy a farmhouse. In the process, 8 men were killed and nearly 30 wounded. One of those wounded was Felgenhauer, who had been shot in the elbow. He was evacuated to England and after a few weeks in hospital wrote home to say, "I am perfectly well now, except for a scar on my elbow, which will always be there." And adding, "I've had a grand time since I was wounded, especially in the hospitals in England." He was able to spend further time on leave whilst visiting Glasgow and London before being sent back to the Western Front in November 1917. Within 3 weeks, Felgenhauer was wounded again, this time by a fragment of shell which struck him in the back as his battalion was being relieved from the front line near Ypres. This was a less serious wound, and he was treated in France before being sent onto a convalescent depot near Auvergne. He returned to his battalion at the end of April 1918, days after it had participated in the recapture of Villers-Bretonneux. Felgenhauer fought through the Battle of Amiens on the 8th of August and the hard combat that followed. By the end of September, the Australian Corps were faced with the strongest German defences on the Western Front, the Hindenburg Line. On 29th of September 1918, the 57th Battalion was part of a massive operation to catch the line over Bellecourt Tunnel. In the Australian sector, the attack was launched by 2 American regiments, which struggled to advance across a strongly defended ground, which had multiple entrances to the canal tunnel below. German defenders, popping up unexpectedly all across the battlefield, were able to break down the American advance and cause confusion across the entire line. The Australians launched their attack into this confusion, in many places reorganising the Americans and pushing the attack forward. Felgenhauer came across a wounded American soldier, but as he was assisting stretcher bearers to take him to safety, the party was struck by an artillery shell, and Felgenhauer was killed instantly. His company commander wrote to Felgenhauer's parents to say, "He was one of my best NCOs. By his death, I have lost a true and tried friend." Corporal Felgenhauer was buried in Bellecourt, British Cemetery, under the epitaph chosen by his family. "Life's labour done, to God and country true life's crown hath won." He was 29 years old. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, amongst almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. His photograph is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Corporal Frederick Charles Felgenhauer, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
Shoulder, arms.
They shall grow not old as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Catapult party, present, arms. Catapult party, shoulder, arms.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget.
Catapult party, outwards, turn. Catapult party, quick, march.
We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes this evening's last post ceremony. We thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.